What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Travel Runners podcast. I'm your host, Liz Myers, and today I have the notorious co host, Christie, and the one and only Killian on the podcast to talk about a topic that is maybe not so much running related. We're going to try to keep it running related, but it is all about free will. And I have to start out this conversation with A, why, and B, how it got into Christy and I's conversation so much that we were like, we just need to have Killian on the podcast. So we were listening to a single track episode with Killian and Finn, and I know Killian pretty well, and we may have kind of talked about this a little bit, but Killian kind of let it slip his thoughts and opinions about free will. And for someone that kind of knows Killian, I can tell you I could hear the struggle with him trying to actually talk about this. And I was like, oh, he's not wanting to let it out of the bag. And yet he did a little. So we all talked about this, cat is out of the bag, Killian's opinion about free will. And it brought so much interest to me. And then Christy, funny enough, reached out and was like, hey, did you hear this episode with Killian? It's about free will. We got to talk about his opinion and everything. And so, yes, Killian, we did talk about you behind your back about free will. And then we were both like, we just need to have him on the podcast and have a whole conversation about this. So, Killian, thank you so much for being on the podcast and getting ready to dive into all things about free will.
Thanks. I'm excited. This is one of my favorite topics to think about, so it's good. But I was reluctant initially on on single track for sure. My wife was listening in the background and she was like, any normal person could have been asked that question and just given a reasonable answer.
And I hate to say this, but you struggled to kind of talk about it, and then you just let it go and kind of tiptoed around the idea. But let's go kind of dive into it, and then we'll just get into free will. So tell us, in your opinion, what free will is. I did my research. I know Christy's done her research as well. And then I'll say some things I saw and that I've read and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I think it's useful up front to define some terms. I mean, I'll just throw all my cards on the table right away. I think the popular conception of free will is just totally an illusion. And I think that the idea that you could have done otherwise in any given moment is not supported by any kind of scientific fact. So a qualification here, just when talking about the metaphysics of the universe, a lot of this is speculation. And so anyone in a religious context is able to say that free will is given to you by God. In a secular context, we're attempting to explain how you can get free will from the atomic structure of the universe. So those two things are just somewhat incompatible metaphysically. So say that right up front. But the idea that you could have done otherwise is called libertarian free will. And so that in the philosophical lingo. And so that is what I am leaning against. There's two more terms that are probably good to define right up front. And one is determinism. Determinism is the idea that every thought, decision, and action you make is the inevitable result of prior causes, your genetics, upbringing, environment, the current state of your brain, the current atomic state of the universe, essentially. So that's determinism. And then compatibilism is the idea that while you couldn't necessarily have done otherwise, because that's just not supported by the atomic structure of the universe. So even if your brain follows the physical laws, compatibilism would say you act according to your goals and you are not forced or manipulated. And free will isn't about escaping causality. It's about being the kind of system that can reflect, decide, and act on reasons. So those are there's a few terms to define right up front. To me, compatibilism is just like a cop. It seems like someone's trying to comfort themselves when the idea of free will, not having free will, is kind of scary. And so my base assumptions are that free will doesn't exist, and I believe that for a couple different reasons. One, if you just try to sit and meditate, it's hard to think that you have free will. Meditation, you try to sit in silence and turn off your thoughts for a little bit, Like your thoughts are just going to be delivered to you on a conveyor belt that you really can't control. And so if we can't even control the voice in our head that we all identify with most in life, like what does free will even mean? And then two is just the so there's the experience side, like I don't feel like I have free will when I really pay attention. And then two, just the atomic structure of the universe piece. It's like ultimately we're all up quarks, down quarks. We're gluons, or electrons, neutrons, protons, all just combined together in this thing that has awareness for some reason. And if you put that puzzle together, I'm going to end up finishing this sentence the same way 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times if you rewind to the universe, because it's not possible to rearrange the atomic structure of the universe in those moments. And so those are my two basic assumptions about free will.
100%. And in majority of the research and the diving into free will, like what is free will, what is not free will, I came up with the same stuff. I saw like a good simplified explanation is like free will is a character in a storyline, and then not having free will is like being the author of the storyline. So like the two ways to be able to determine the difference. Um so so many things. Chrissy, do you have anything you want to start with?
Yeah, I want to add to what you just said. Something that when I was reading everything, because, like we're kind of in a book club because Killian told us to read a book about this and we all read it. And it was a good read. It was super short, which, was great, to prep for this podcast. But one of the things that helped me mentally grasp things was thinking about the fact of like, we want to think that we're living our lives, but we're actually not. And, if you think about not having free will, you're not living your life, you're experiencing life, like life is living through you. And like when I think about that, that really helps me kind of grasp that concept a little bit better, because we really live in what I would say a quote unquote like self-made world. And to me, that's one of the biggest like obstacles with thinking about not having free will is you really have to give up your ego. And obviously there's tons of benefits to doing that. But yeah, that was super interesting, like to think about that.
For sure, for sure. And I will say the book that we had the book club on is Free Will, but it's Sam Harris, right? Sam
Yeah.
Harris. Yeah. Phenomenal book. Like Chrissy said, it was a quick read. I listened to it and it was really, really good to listen to. And I think the thing that caught me off guard, and I think like looking back now and after doing so much research on like what free will was, I kind of feel silly for thinking Killian was like off the wall. I'm like, what? Killian, what? And then I've done some research and now I'm like, oh wait, I think that way. And then I, did more digging. I know Christy and I spent like an hour on a conversation talking about free will, and I was like, I kind of think that way. And she's like, me too. And I'm like, ah, crap. Like, okay, so now I need to like really, really dive into this. And what would you say? Like, obviously, Killian, you told us to read Free Will and, get that like just kind of different point of view. But when, what, how did you really come about experiencing that, like the thought of what you feel and how you feel about free will now?
So I would say that I was living with the illusion of free will for most of my life until I had a pretty powerful experience in the woods of West Virginia, where I came to the epiphany that I was studying the wrong thing in college, and that I really like the choices in air quotes that I had made in my life were like leading me to a place that was ultimately going to make me unhappy. And so that's when I really started to dive into philosophy, the esoteric kind of Buddhist wisdom, and really started meditating. And so once you learn to meditate, I feel like from the experience side, it becomes really obvious that you don't control your thoughts. And like I said earlier, it's like if you don't control your thoughts, it's how then do you think you control the other pieces of your life that you feel less identified with than the voice inside your head? So there's a few aspects to my life that really pointed me in the direction of and made me open to thinking that free will is an illusion. And another is that the most powerful experiences I've ever had. So like the hinge points of my life. I talked a little bit about this on the Single Track podcast. The hinge points in my life, the biggest pieces, the biggest paths I could have in air quotes taken, those all seem to have the least amount of free will. So if I think about falling in love, like I met my wife Susie at when I was 16, and the way that I would describe falling in love is like being swept down a torrential river and falling over the waterfall at the end of it. And there was no way for me to stop myself in that instance. Like you can't, it was impossible. It's definitely not a choice. I wasn't like, I'm going to fall in love with this person. And I absolutely could not have decided to not fall in love with this person. So, most powerful experience in my life, no free will present. Second most powerful experience in my life, being in the woods in West Virginia and having the epiphany that I was studying something I didn't want to do. Like, if I had free will, I probably would have been like, hey man, you've been spending money in college and you should probably do the thing that you set out to do because that makes the most practical sense. But no free will present in realizing that. And so like those two instances are huge. I think when someone kind of when someone is arguing that free will does exist, often they'll resort to like, well, people are capable of reason. But if you think about what reason actually does to you, if if you are reasoned out of a position you once held, where's the free will in that? Because you are just recognizing the argument that's being made and helplessly being brought along by it. So there's just like the arguments for free will just kind of fall apart on the basis that I can't actually decide to believe them. So that's it was the hinge moments of my life that really kind of made me open to it, and then meditation is really the gateway drug to being like, oh, there's lots of things about our daily experience that we see and feel that really don't actually map onto what I would think of as the metaphysical underpinnings of the way the universe is actually working.
I think for me to even begin to start to understand the concept of not having free will, you have to have some level of meditation or be trying to meditate, because you really have to be in the thought process that you're the observer of your thoughts. Like, you are not your thoughts. You don't create those
Yeah,
thoughts. You have no control over them. Like, if you've not taken, I feel like that's the first step to understanding
yeah,
it.
100%.
So this is kind of like a random thought conversation or like question. But do you feel like becoming a runner has made you more of someone that believes in that? Because like we are out in the middle of nowhere in our thoughts, talking and having conversation with our own thoughts, or in a sense meditating out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, totally. It's another one of those things where like, why do I want to do this? I feel like if I'm going to go suffer for 60 hours and I'm going to be awake for multiple nights and run through the night and I'm going to lose half my toenails and chafe and gag when I'm attempting to eat rice at an aid station, like you'd think I should be able to come up with some like salient reason why this makes sense. And I just have nothing, when I really like boil deep down to it, I'm just like, I don't have something that built the foundation for me to want to do these things. And so, yeah, it's like I just look at the desire as confusing. Like, sure, I want to do it. It's real to me. It's meaningful to me, but I have no clue. So yeah, it's like the love and passion. It's like what I said about falling in love with a person, but kind of the love and passion that you can feel toward an activity, I think doesn't really make that much sense. And I think even people who have these like salient reasons for why they're doing something, ultimately, I think that they're telling themselves a story looking back at their life.
Oh, okay. So tell me more about that. So, in a sense, if I have a why, as in, like I want to do this, um, I want to, I'm going to run this 100 miles to, you know, show my kids they can do hard things. What's your thought on that?
So it's I don't want to undermine anyone's
Mm.
reasons. So like I think the universe is meaningless, but that means that I get to decide what's meaningful. And so that
Hmm.
means that everybody else gets to decide what's meaningful too. And so again, I'm like the facts of reality that, or what I think of as the facts of reality, I don't want anyone to take it as me attempting to undermine their reasons for doing it. So
100%.
with that being said up front, like I think the easier example is like let's look at the addiction to ultra runner pipeline. Like
Oh,
I think
okay.
that that is a huge chunk of the ultra running community has this like addiction past, whether it's to drugs or food or something like that. And so that person can look back and like maybe they're sitting there and they're scrolling Instagram and they see David Goggins and he's like, "Don't be a bitch, get out of bed. Like who's going to carry the boats, you know?" But can they account for why in that moment that managed to sink into their brain and give them the motivation to do it? I think once you're asking the question why enough on any of those stories, you get to, I don't know. And so, why did someone fall into addiction in the first place? Well, you can again tell these stories about uh, a bad childhood, circumstances, what have you, and ultimately you just get down to the mystery of like, well, what pulled you out of that? Like, surely someone who is suffering with any kind of addiction has been exposed to healthy living at different times throughout their life. So why didn't they decide to change their life at milestone 1 as opposed to milestone 150? Like what's the story there? And I think everything that we're doing as human beings is applying our reasons post hoc to the decisions that we've made in our life. And so, like in your example, the like I want to do this to uh, show my kids that you can do hard things. Like, what is it inside you that makes you want to be a role model in that way? What is it inside you that makes you want to run as opposed to mastering the violin? Like, all of those options are available to you. But to me, it's the atomic structure of the universe, including your brain, that's giving you the motivation to do A instead of C. And ultimately, you look back, and if you ask yourself the question why enough and drill really down to the bottom of it, I think you get to the answer, I don't know.
No, I can understand that. And a big thing I think with the how I view it and how I've seen it and experienced it in my own personal just from coaching and everything is a lot of times it's like something from the past is making them decide to do, something has kind of guided them or geared them to make this decision on what their why is. And I know for me, like when I really dug into this and I was like, well, then, like, why am I an ultra runner? Why do I love running so much? Like, oh, I chose to do hard things. I want, like that. It's always like I've always wanted to see what I could do as a human. And then, like, I really boiled things down, but I'm like, but why? And I genuinely got to a point where I'm like, I don't know. Like, it used to always be like, I didn't want to be out of shape. I didn't want to be lazy. I wanted to do crazy things. Like, I wanted to test my limits. And at the end of the day, if I like
But
really boiled it down, yeah,
why did those ideas even appeal to you?
100%. Like I got to a point. I'm like, I'm not really sure. Like I have nothing to prove. I have, like, I don't need to be told like I'm doing good. Like no offense, I don't care. Like I've screwed up in life and done some crazy things, and I will have to be 100% honest. Like there was a point in my life where I wanted to be a professor, and I was about to go into my master's program to then go to get my PhD, and I'm sitting in the bed in my mom's house like, what am I doing? Like I don't even think being in the industry of a teacher is what I want to do, especially in like professor, college, and like just I didn't do it. I took a different job. And kind of like you, like I just had a weird realization, and money didn't matter. Like I just spent so much money on my degree, and it was just like I'm just going to do something else. And then I did that, and then now here I am, and I work for Everyday Ultra, and I'm a coach, and I have a podcast on YouTube. I never would have thought this would have happened. And yeah, it's just crazy. It is so crazy. And that was kind of a tangent, but I can relate to your story of like those moments in life where I really did look back recently and I'm like, I don't think I can explain it. Oh, I can't hear you, Christy.
Oh, Chrissy, you might have muted yourself
Sorry,
or something.
I'm
There we
back.
go.
The question that I have for Killian is thinking like applying this to winning the Triple Crown, because obviously you put in all the work, like not having free will like doesn't discount that at all. But how do you process that with having such a huge achievement in life? What does that look like? How do you feel like that has changed the way you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it has made the emotion of pride extremely. I think pride is pretty much only a negative thing. I think being proud of. So let me use an example. I am not. I think the idea of nationalism like makes no sense. Like, why would you be proud of something you could not control, right? So like, I'm not proud of being American. Like, I'm grateful to live in a place where I have the opportunities that I do. But being proud, like, what does that even mean? Like, I didn't control this, and so I would apply that same idea to everything else in my life. Like, do I feel proud of the Triple Crown? Like that truly doesn't map onto like my reality map in my head. And so instead, what I felt most after Moab was gratitude. What I feel every day running and having this be my life and I'm gonna go for a run after this and that'll be my office for the day. Like I feel gratitude. And so I'm getting to live this life that's amazing. I'm getting to pursue my passion. Sure, I am putting in the work. Again, it's like, why do I have the proclivity to do so? I don't know. And so the pride aspect, I feel as if is that is really a byproduct of the illusion continuing to affect our lives. I mean, I'm gonna make breakfast at some point today, right? And I feel in those moments like I'm going to decide between eggs or chicken and whatever. And ultimately, I think if I boil down to those decisions, I get to the I don't know answer. But I do feel still I'm like taken in day by day by the illusion of free will. So even my philosophical underpinnings don't protect me from like having the apish human experience that we're all having day to day, right? But yeah, the emotion of pride, I think ultimately there's a reason that in philosophical and religious traditions it's thought of as a sin. And I think it's because it doesn't actually map onto reality. Like
Mm.
I think gratitude is a much more helpful, a much more factually true, valid emotion to be feeling in those moments because well, like we're talking about, it's like you just don't control the circumstances, the proclivities, your genetic strengths, all of those things that lead you to being good at such and such. And gratitude, I think, is just a much better emotion. It's just like that's just a better framework for approaching your achievements because then gratitude is divorced from ego. Like pride is built on ego. And I think getting rid of this conception of yourself as something that can be prideful ultimately will help you be a better person in the world, responds to the haters in a way that makes more sense. And it'll also just make you better toward the people in your life that are supporting you. So like at Moab, I was just overwhelmed by gratitude while I'm like running with my pacers through the muck in the night in the freezing rain. I see Susie at every crude aid station, and my family is flown from all corners of the country to be there. Like there's no pride in that moment. It's just like I'm thankful that this happens to be my existence.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome answer because that's kind of what I came to when I was, kind of looking into all this was, I mean, you have to have gratitude through it all, or otherwise, like, it doesn't make sense, like, because again, you have to drop that ego, like you said, with the pride and everything. And I think too, as like coaches, if you think about it, a lot of people want to credit stuff to willpower. Like I magically willed myself to do this, right? But if you think about your environment, it's like if you go out and you have a bad run, you're not going to say, you're not going to like beat yourself up. You're going to say, well, what were the conditions? Did I sleep poorly? Did I, lift weight yesterday? Did I go too hard? Was I, dehydrated? We look at all these systems in this environment to try to, make sense of things. So I think like as a coach, it kind of helps a little bit to understand, wrap your mind around that a little bit easier.
Yeah, 100%. And it's I think important to say too that like the belief that free will doesn't exist doesn't undermine anything. If you look at my Instagram, it's all about it, like a lot of it's about discipline and holding yourself accountable to your goals. And I still think that personal responsibility and a disbelief in free will, they coexist just fine together. So we can kind of get into how that's possible. But yeah, I mean, ultimately what not believing in free will has sort of done for me from like a mindset perspective toward other people too is it's just like made me far more charitable, toward the worst people in society, the best people in society, and everything in between, and even the worst and the best, I would say like broken and functioning are probably better words to describe like the two, the spectrum of like human behavior. And so it's just I think ultimately people's fear about removing free will from the equation is that you kind of divorce personal responsibility from daily living, and I just don't think that's true. And I think ultimately it has this effect of kind of looking at people the same way I look at a bear, like we're just we're just meat robots that happen to be behaving in certain ways. And ultimately, like we want to arrange the societal carrots and sticks in ways that make the robots behave the best way possible.
So I have to say, I've never heard someone call human beings meat robots, but that is top notch. But kind of getting back to decisions and like discipline, one of the things I actually wrote down, and I'm glad it kind of got brought up, is like you are a very disciplined person. I remember first meeting you, you were telling me some of the things that you do, and that was like the first thing that like came to mind. Is like, oh shoot, Killian's super super disciplined. Like he does the things. And then like I met your mom, and you've talked to me a lot about your mom and your upbringing, and like your whole family seems to be very disciplined. So like when I thought about this and like how I wanted to approach, like, do you choose to be disciplined? Did you make that choice to be disciplined? Did you watch discipline in your family, which has made you be more disciplined? So, like, let's get into that topic and kind of like your belief on someone that is disciplined versus not. And I'm not trying to talk shit about anyone or anything of that nature, but like, I can think of some people that like tell me all the time, like, yeah, I want to do this. I'll do it tomorrow. And then they don't do it tomorrow. And then they don't do it the next day and the next day. And then, there's the three of us. And I'm sure everyone that's listening that's gets up, does the damn work, doesn't think twice. Yes, don't get me wrong. Some days I'm like, I don't feel like running, like my legs are sore. I have a to-do list down to my ankles, and yet I still get the work done. So let's hear your thoughts and opinions, Killian.
Yeah, so a couple things to say up front. I defined determinism when we first started talking, and one thing to separate from determinism is that determinism does not equal a belief in destiny. So I do not believe that actions are predetermined, but simply that we cannot account for the baseline reasons behind actions. So hopefully it'll make sense why I'm bringing that up right now. But if I'll use myself as an example. So if I think about why I have a proclivity towards discipline, there's so many reasons. So you get into the nature versus nurture debate here. I think that nature versus nurture is like 80% nature and 20% nurture. So I think a lot is predetermined by genetics. And if I think about myself, when I was 3 years old, I was in swim lessons and we got patches for swimming various distances. All the older kids were getting a 1,500-meter patch. And me as a 3-year-old decided I wanted a 1,500-meter patch. And so I swam for 2 hours straight to get this stupid circular patch that I put on a little white bucket hat and wore to the beach. And so I was so stoked about it. But like, why did this 3-year-old decide like I'm going to do something for 2 hours? You think about you use the term willpower. Like, I don't think it's possible for my parents to have nurtured that willpower into me as a 3-year-old. There's probably not enough time. I feel like just doesn't. That is just was just there from the very beginning. And so, like my whole life, that proclivity showed up in many different ways. When I decided to be good at something, it typically just happened because I was always going to be willing to put the work into it. And so, I was a swimmer growing up. In high school, I swam 9 times a week. So we had the weekends off. Often had swim meets, but I would swim Monday through Friday in the morning for 2 hours, and then Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in the afternoon for 2 hours. And so I'm fitting all of that in around school. I'm taking a bunch of AP classes. I have all of this stuff to do. So my life is like extremely structured with basically no free time. And so how do you get through that? You're disciplined. We had a class in high school seminar, or it wasn't a class. We had like a class period where you could do homework, in like homeroom basically. And I remember looking at a bunch of my friends who would constantly complain about the fact that they had no time to do the work in school, and all they're doing is goofing off in seminar. I'm like, dude, this is free time when you have to be here to get work done. And to me, it was always obvious. I'm like, I'm going to do everything I can in this hour and 20 minutes so that I have to do like hopefully nothing at home. And so, like, why did that? Why did I have that? I mean, part of it is due to the 3-year-old who swam the 1500 meters. Part of it is due to the circumstances of my environment having no free time and a massive amount of structure with swimming. So all of that kind of plays a role. But the framework of decisions, does that factor into it? I don't necessarily think so. Although that being said, I think there's a difference between voluntary and involuntary action. So I'm not being compelled in any instance to do something. I am voluntarily doing the things that I'm doing, and so that kind of predicts what I will do in the future. But am I making decisions moment to moment to do it? That doesn't map onto my current framework that I believe in, although it totally would have at the time I was in high school, because obviously I wasn't thinking about any of this back then. And I think it's probably pretty hard to talk to someone who hasn't been exposed to meditation, esoteric philosophy about any of this, especially in a Western context, if that all makes sense. I don't know. That was kind of a rambly answer. I don't know if I actually really got there.
No, for sure. It rambly is good. We need the explanation, I guess, a little more than just like no, yes, and all that. Um, I but I still feel like I'm gonna push against you in the sense like,
Please.
would you say then, um, I'm gonna use an example of just someone because I'm not trying to call anyone out, but like for the person that won't get off the couch and go do their run that they're supposed to do, like what's the difference between that person and then we'll say you that has gotten up and done your run for the day?
I'm lucky to have the proclivity to want to do that. Like
Mm.
that's really the difference. So why, like, I think ultimately no free will can exist with agency. So that person has the ability to be affected by something in their life that gets them up off the couch. Like I don't want to strip any of that away. I think that if I'm like if I'm talking to this about, or if I'm talking about this to future children I want to have at some point, like, am I going to qualify all of this the same way I'm doing in this podcast right now? Like, no, probably not. I'm going to say, like, you need to take action to change your life. And the fact is that that is still true. But the difference between the person who is sitting around on their couch all day gaining weight, or feeling as if their life is meaningless, and me, is ultimately the fact that I've been blessed with a brain that's not going to allow me to do that. And so how can they tap into the same wavelength I'm on if they want to do that? Ultimately it's just kind of a mystery. And then, like, that is not the most reassuring, I think, to say in terms of like what we would want to see for societal change. But I do think we we can arrange the, like I said, with the societal carrots and sticks, like how the incentives of the culture we'd like to build in the world, we can arrange it so that the most people are going to be motivated to improve themselves. And that's what I think that capitalism as a system has like done particularly well, is arrange it so that people who want to climb the rungs have the ability to do so. but how do we catch the people who don't have the proclivity? And that's the answer. That's like the question of society. And I think pretending as if free will exists doesn't actually get you any closer to that answer. I think like trying to recognize the baseline reality is a better way to go about trying to solve that puzzle.
Something that like I've thought about through this, because it helps me to apply it to my own life. And so I look
Yeah.
back and almost 20 years ago, I lost 100 pounds. And I had one of like, people will talk about this for different things like addictions and stuff like that, where you basically have that moment where you just completely change your life. And that's what happened to me. And when I look at that and thinking, well, like at the time, I felt like I made that choice to lose the weight, that I made that decision, that was all willpower. But technically, like if I look back on it, essentially what happened was my brain reached a threshold where, the pain of remaining overweight outweighed, the effort required to make a change. So I didn't choose that. It's just that, predetermined conditions like genetics, I think a big part of it is genetics, life experiences
Yeah.
up to that point, made me hit that threshold. And then from that point, I changed my environment, in order to actually achieve that weight loss. So it's really hard to look back on that because it's like, man, I achieved this. But then it's like, I should really just have gratitude that I did hit that threshold, because not a lot of people do. And not a lot of people make those changes. And so it kind of makes me think about like what you said about like the person sitting on the couch, like how do they get to that point, And it's like, some of that is just in your genetics, is predetermined. And it's really
Yeah.
hard to grasp that concept. But I mean, I like, as somebody who was overweight and obese as a child, it's like I don't think I chose that, like like it's like I've got that side of it where it's like I didn't want to do that, but it happened, and I think genetically I was predetermined to be obese, and then I was, also determined to hit this predetermined to hit this threshold to change everything.
Yeah. And I think like you probably had a predetermined proclivity to hit the threshold, like you're saying. I like the way that you're putting that. But there's also some luck involved. Like I'm like, can you look back and say like, okay, there were these few things that inspired me to change?
Oh, for sure. Like there was like at the time there was back in the day there were infomercials on TV and there were weight loss pills. This was around like New Year's, and like that was obviously triggering in the back of my mind, like subconsciously.
Yeah. So it's like so like there's this side of predetermined genetics, but then there's this side of luck. Like if you just happen like one of those things just happens to like make its way into your brain, like why did that brainworm stick with you? Why does the song that gets stuck in your head get stuck in your head? Like we can't explain that, but it is just like I said with the determinism. It's like I don't think there's destiny, and so perhaps if a different set of inputs had come to you at that time, you might have felt defensive instead of inspired. And like it's it's strange. Weight loss is an interesting one because I think, I've mentioned the like way to structure society. And if you think about like the past few years or the past decade, let's say, with like how we've talked about bodies, like body positivity overall, probably a good thing. But should we arrange the societal structure to encourage people to think of uh, being obese as acceptable, not to society, but to themselves? Like, probably not. Like, that's not the way to influence humans to behave in ways that will A, make them healthier, and B, make society better. It's like all of it's a strange conglomeration of factors that play into like how to manage the facts on the ground. But it's cool to hear from your experience. Like looking back, can you so until you started kind of thinking about free will, like when you looked back at that moment, did you have a story you told yourself?
Oh yeah, for sure. It was just that like one day I got fed up with feeling like my metabolism was crazy and that I was just eating for no reason, and it was like I have this very distinctive memory of this turning point. Like I was, like that is burned into my brain. It's like that was the moment I decided to change my life.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
And I will say, Chrissy and I talked about this. Not so much her, but I was talking about alcoholic and being alcoholic, and like nothing against anyone. I grew up as a child. I remember someone in my family drinking a lot, and as I got older, I was like, I don't ever want to be like that. And I cut drinking a couple years ago, and I haven't touched it since. And like, I don't think of anything. It was just something that, like, in that moment in life, I remember something. Then I was like, I don't ever want to be like remembering my childhood and remembering thinking of this person and being like, this person's an alcoholic. Like, I didn't ever want to think of that of for myself. And in that moment, like Christy, I made the decision to stop drinking. And then I like was talking to Christy about free will and all this. And I'm like, how do you classify that with people that drink compared to people that don't drink? And then we got talking and she's like, well, do you remember like when you were a kid? Like like she kind of egged me on to like think really. And I was like, yeah, like I was experienced this, or I remember this growing up. And like, I didn't ever want to be that way. And I always thought that way as a kid. And then now I'm like, I didn't freaking make that decision. It's been planted in my head forever. And I just finally came to a certain point in my age, or my life, I should say, that I maybe realized I saw certain tendencies in myself that I saw in this person. And I was like, I don't want to be like this. Why am I being like this? And then it finally, like Chrissy, I hit a threshold. That's a great example and way to say it, where I was like, okay, this is not going to happen anymore. But I don't think I would have realized that if like Chrissy and I didn't sit there and think of, like, have that conversation and think it through. I was definitely like, oh, I made that choice. I made that decision. And
But like, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's interesting to look back on moments like that, because if you think about, like, there's someone else who would have made the opposite choice, right? Like there's plenty of examples of people who come from broken homes who then establish broken homes. And then there's plenty of people who come from families that are really toxic who say, okay, I know I never want to be like that. But like, how do you account for the differences between those two people? Because one is clearly logical and one's not, right? In the sense of, like, if we were to make a well-reasoned argument, you'd make a reason for like why you should probably not beat your kids and be an alcoholic and blah blah blah, all those things. But it's like, how do you account for the separation point there? Because I do think there's like those two paths. There's almost like there's like not a middle ground for those kind of, like, air quotes, decisions, pathways to take them.
So I have to say this, and I will try not to say any names in this conversation. So I'm going to use like just an example. Um, but when Chris and I were talking, we talked about that as well, in the sense of like how, there's two paths, and some people choose the path that in a sense makes the right sense. It's logical. You should be a good human, do good that way. And then people go to the other way and they do something else. And we got talking about, like, in the sense, generations. You know what I mean? So like, if I look back, like say X generations, we'll just use like a mom, a grandpa, a dad, and a son, right? So like that grandpa did what, was an alcoholic, drank a whole bunch. That dad didn't know any different. He did the same exact thing. You know what I mean? But then when in generation does the next one, so say that son, realize like being an alcoholic isn't a good thing. I don't want to do that. Like, and I feel like that's where it comes, and it's probably completely different. I just genuinely don't understand it. But like, there's some point in, I feel like, a generation, or maybe in the genetics of people, where that person may have not wanted to be an alcoholic and to drink, and then it gets passed on to someone that actually has enough in them to actually not become alcoholic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And you can also think of it, so even if I believe that it's 80% nature and 20% nurture, like, let's take the 20% side. What if that son, the third generation of that line you just outlined for us, like, what if he has a great teacher,
Mm.
and this teacher says, hey, maybe read these couple books, watch these movies or something like that, or just says, hey, like, you don't have to live your life like this. And maybe that happens to change the structure in the brain at that moment for that person to be like, hey, I'm going to break the cycle. So there's other inputs that can come from the environment that I do think, again, it has something to do with genetics. Like, why is that person open to this idea in that moment? Who knows? But uh, and then a lot of it just comes down to luck. I think there's so much existential luck that's unaccounted for. Basically, like you just like happen to be born where you're born, and you happen to have the brain that you have. Like it's it's strange. But I think the big takeaway is like be more charitable to people misbehaving, because it just is not as simple as like, oh, this person is bad or this person is evil. I like I said earlier, it's like broken versus function, I think is the way to think about, human misbehavior.
Yeah, makes so much sense. And well, I mean, it doesn't make sense, but it does make sense at the same time. So kind of going, or Chrissy, do you have anything that you want to add or put onto that?
The only thing I would add is like talking about how there could be such, like, if you think about it, like let's say two kids come from the exact same broken home and then they go on to have drastically different lives. So you would think, same upbringing, like similar genetics, blah blah blah. But like one of those kids could have had like a 2-minute conversation with a teacher, kind of like what you said, that drastically changed their life. Obviously, like we don't know all these like little tiny things that are happening, and then all the underlying like genetic stuff too. But it like I think a lot of people can think of a time in their life where they did have like that 2-minute conversation with someone, or something like a 2-minute thing happen that, you don't realize is this huge domino effect. And, like you could really hurt your brain thinking about stuff like that. But I mean, it definitely like goes to show, when you're thinking about these chain of events that happen, like there's an explanation whether like we can actually perceive it or not, I feel like.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I think we've kind of talked about this, and I would love to hear both of your thoughts on this, but like I feel like until like maybe in a sense we have meditated enough to like really be where I think all three of us, I think Killian's like way up here, and then like it's maybe Chrissy and then me,
No,
but
I'm at the bottom. I'm like new to all this.
but I will say in a lot of all of this research that I did, which like I feel like I dug so hard into this, and like it really genuinely made me take a step and like look back and like look at a lot of things. And it's so crazy to me because in that moment, I would have fought you to say I made that freaking decision. And like now I'm standing here being like, but did I? Because like I can think of this definitely playing a role into that, definitely playing a role into this, and it just, I have so many questions. And I think also, in a sense, taking all of this and going into running, part of me wonders if that's why I run so much too. And don't get me wrong, like I have been running for well, not a long time, but long enough that like I wasn't thinking like this when I was into running. I don't even really know. I mean, I know why I got into running, but I don't know like what made me actually continue to run. But I think it was that empty space just to think more. And I've gotten a lot more like open minded. I've thought a lot about things I don't think I would have ever thought about in my entire life. Um, and now I look back and I'm like, but I've always kind of thought about these things, just like never had the opportunity to like sit and really think about things. But, like it's just such a weird dynamic to be in. And I am very thankful that Killian, you talked about this and like kind of like opened the gates, and Christy and I were like, oh my God, we gotta talk about this. Like, what the heck is going on? He's insane. And now I'm like, shit, I think I kind of agree with him. So am I crazy too? But um it is, I think, just really
Can I
I
can,
go ahead.
can I ask you a question just like real quick about that evolution there? Like
Yeah, go ahead.
when like if you would say now that you don't believe in free will, I don't know if you're fully there yet or not, but like let's say you would, like does it make what shift does it give you looking back on your life? Like do you like does my talking about like the flip from pride to gratitude make sense? Like just give me kind of like a, because this has been like it wasn't that long ago. If this was kind of like the first time you've been like introduced to the conversation on like a, not introduced to the conversation, I would say, because you've read plenty of philosophy, but really thought about it in like objective terms necessarily. So like just I'm just curious about like the mental journey from listening to me on Finn, doing some research and being like, huh.
Oh, so, and will say life has been crazy. I know not everyone knows. You two probably know more than your average person, but for me, life has been really crazy. I've been struggling, like trying to manage everything. And, it's, I felt like when I dove into all of this, it was like the perfect timing because like life got to a point where I'm like, fuck life, fuck this, fuck everything. Like I was a miserable person. And, it, things happen for a reason. I'm a firm believer. And I've always thought that like, this happened when I was a kid. This happened when I was a kid. And diving into all of this really made me take a step back. And like you mentioned, like when you had the come to moments out in the middle of the woods, and I've had so many experiences like that. Like I can think of probably way more than I'll ever admit. And back then I genuinely was like, I've always made those decisions. Like I made the decision to do this and I made the decision to do that. And I've always been a scientific person. Like I went to school for science. I am like a data. I want to see the data. I want to see the proof. And a lot of the things I've said before, I've realized like this doesn't have any proof in it. Like, oh, don't get me started. I've really like dug into a lot of things where I'm like, this makes no sense if you really think about it. And so it was like this crazy, like a genuinely just crazy time in my life where I was struggling as a human to be a human, and then realizing that like I have no control and will over any of this. Like just ride it out, Liz, just ride it out. So like I tried to detach from things, and like I haven't been on social media in over a month, and I was like, this is what I need to do. I made that decision. Like I made the decision. I've told Christy before, like I made a decision. I need to be off social media. It's consuming me. I'm comparing myself. I that's not me. And I think like now looking at all this, like I can think of multiple occasions where like life just got too crazy and I kept doing the same thing and I was struggling, and I wouldn't admit that I was struggling. I just kept throwing it under the rug. And I've done that from past experiences and doing things like, so like it all kind of made sense. But I think in really taking the time to like dive into this, like it's really allowed me to just like be more okay with everything going on, instead of like, I'm a control freak. I like order. I like things laid out very nicely, and it just hasn't been. So it's like I need to stop being such a freaking control freak, and it's not easy. But it just has genuinely been such this crazy roller coaster ride. And I know like that was just a whole bunch of like vomit, but I think it's really made me take a step back and realize like I have been stressing the dumbest shit in my life and thinking like I'm controlling this and I'm making the decision on all of this, and I'm not. I'm really not. Um and it's just been wild. I don't think I could really put it into words, but it has humbled me in a lot of ways and made me now struggle with the present moment a little, because I feel like, and we've kind of hinted around this, but like we've all looked back and seen the thing, right? I'm struggling with it now, like being in the now, because if I don't have the free will, like how did I get on this episode then? I don't have to be on this episode. Like I didn't have to reach out to Killian and say, hey, like I want to talk about all this. So like, oh, it just like I keep getting more into it. And then I'm like, okay, Liz, you need to stop. You need to stop. But that's kind of been my crazy journey and wild answer. But Christy, what about you? You're muted again.
Nope, muted again.
Man, I'm not doing good today. I'm going to get fired from my amateur co-hosting job I have here. It's actually given me like a sense of peace in a way. Don't get me wrong. Like I was definitely, there's still times where I'm resistant to it, because I think it's easy to, when you look back at any of your failures, to accept it, because it's like, oh, I'm not responsible for that. That wasn't my fault, but it's, you've got to like start thinking about the gratitude piece, to look back at your successes and not take all that pride and, be like, oh, this was all me, I did all this on my own. But I get the piece from the fact that I don't like, I'm new to like meditation is like new to me. I read, like I've told Liz this, I'm obsessed with Eckhart Tolle right now. And I read, I've been reading his books like over the past year. And so that's really helped me with thinking about being the observer of your thoughts. And I find that's very powerful for me, like as far as like experiencing life. Because I definitely in the past have gotten hung up with, crazy thoughts like we all do. It's like, where did that thought come from? Like, But anyways, I just feel like this kind of like aligns with that like really well for me. So being like, because I'm already practicing trying to be the observer of my thoughts, and then it's like, okay, I'm this, like I'm not my mind, I'm not my brain, like I don't have control over this thing, but there's something else, going on here that I'm just experiencing. And for me, it's like I'm just chilling, like letting life happen now. It's like that's the only way that I can process it in the present moment. I feel like when you look back at things and try to process this, it is easier to see, but kind of like you, Liz, like what you were saying, like struggling in the present. I could see that because it's like maybe when you're thinking like right now, I've got to make a decision, and you're like, well, I don't actually have any control over this decision. You're like, what am I even doing here? But I feel like you're still like letting that life live through you. You're still the observer of all these things. You're still a part of it too. Like you're one of the dominoes that, in this chain of events that happens. So it's been very interesting. And there's still times where I'm like, when I think about all this and I'm like, I don't know anything. I was like, I don't understand this. I'm so confused. And then I just like, my brain just shuts off, but it's been fun.
And yeah, it's like we don't know anything really. Like
Yeah.
we don't even, why is there even an observer? That like that question, if you drill down to that, it's like it doesn't make sense. We're all made of, I'm sitting on a couch and I'm made of the same things the couch is made from. Like, why isn't the couch having this conversation about free will, but I happen to be? It's like, oh, well, the arrangement of the up corks and down corks works out so that I can speak these words into the void. It's very confusing. But I do think like Liz, you said with your kind of hectic life recently, like ride it out. It's like that's sort of what you're doing your whole life. And if you can, I think living with the illusion is fun. Like I mentioned about having breakfast or like deciding where you're going to run today. Like all of those things, the framework of decisions is okay for that. But what I think really like the disbelief in free will gives me is when I sit down and zoom out, I just am more forgiving of myself and others, and it does make certain aspects of culture or society seem like totally ridiculous, like the criminal justice system or things that I think we could reform to make it more likely that you know the puppet strings will arrange in a way that helps more people behave better. So it is confusing, but it's like it gives me this like massive sense of beauty. Like so if you think about what, like, as society has become more secular, I think that one thing that's been lost is the idea that we're connected to something greater than ourselves. And what disbelief in free will can help kind of spurn, I think, is this appreciation that you're a part of this like grand system, whether you just want to think of it as your mind, which I think is if you get into those flow states meditating, your mind is literally infinity. It seems endless, like both visually, experientially, all of the things. But then you're also a part of this greater system called the Earth. The Earth is a part of this greater system in the universe, and all of those things. This will be a topic for another day, but I believe in universal consciousness, and so it's like, but my belief in free will has led me directly to that, and so it's like I think once you kind of accept the fact that you're not this specific individual agent that I think our specific hyper individualistic society wants you to believe that you are, you can accept that the greater fact of infinity is working through you. And like that goes back to uh, you know, what Christy has said about living life, and life is living through you. But it is really, it's this uh, higher power, if you will, of the atomic structure of the universe. Liz talked about causality and looking back at her own life, thinking about like this when A led to B, B led to C. But there's a level of causality underneath all of this that is essentially like that Microsoft screensaver where the little dot is somewhat randomly bouncing around, but it's not random at all. Like it has a path that it's taking, and I think if you add 1,000, let's say 8 billion other little dots to that screen, that's what humanity athletes. We're just bouncing around like that, and sometimes bouncing off each other, sometimes bouncing off the walls, sometimes bouncing off the barriers in our own mind. And if you can just accept that, it's kind of this beautiful picture of what is really going on here.
So I have so many questions now, but we won't dive into that other topic. Oh my goodness. So, oh, I have a topic that I
Liz is
think
struggling.
I am right now. I have a topic that I'm probably going to take out of this conversation, but I am dying to ask you. So I'm going to flag this just for my own sake. Killian, what's your thought then, and you will not hurt my feelings, on someone that is gay versus not gay?
I mean, I don't like, what do you mean when you ask that question? Like, I
Okay,
think that,
so
yeah,
like, do
like,
you, and I'm not going to use me as an example, and I promise you will not hurt my feelings. Do you think people choose to be gay or not gay? Do you think it's,
Well,
they
that's
were,
easy. He doesn't believe in choice at all.
yeah.
but do you, how do
I think I get what you're asking. Like, I think there are environmental factors that can play a role in 100% of human behavior. So, like, uh, if you think about um, social contagion, like, do I think the like massive growth in identification with the letters in the past decade has something to do with biology? Well, yes, but I think that it's biology leading to social contagion. You know, we've arranged there's been a chunk of society that's tried to rearrange the social pyramid to put whatever, like, previous, like, air quote, previously disenfranchised groups atop the pyramid. And so, like, when you rearrange society like that, I think that, like, more people are going to identify as, like, the class that gets you more status in the social hierarchy. So that's a very vague way of talking about this that I think most people will latch onto. But, like, obviously people don't make decisions to be gay or straight. Like, if you're talking from an evolutionary perspective, and, like, evolution does not inform our morals. Like, morality is almost in every case like anti-evolution. But if you're talking evolutionary, like, how does being gay make sense? Like, it just doesn't, right? Like, like, if your purpose, in quotes, I don't believe in purpose, but if is to reproduce, which it seems like most biological organisms, like, that's kind of what they're here to do, right? Like, being gay doesn't really make that much sense, right? So, from a free will perspective, like, if you could arrange your free will to accord exactly with, like, the biological imperatives of nature, like, why would you be gay, right? So, like, it doesn't make that much sense to make that decision. So, like, obviously, I don't believe in free will, and so I clearly, like Chrissy
yeah.
said, it's like easy answer. But from a, like, biological perspective, it's like no one would be making that decision unless we
Mhm.
arrange society in a way to encourage people to make that decision.
Okay, so do you think it's a genetic thing?
I don't know. I have no clue. I mean, probably. I think almost everything is a genetic thing. I mean, even the nature nurture debate I find to be somewhat uh like the 80-20 number is gray, because, like, if you it's like, what is an artificial sweetener? An artificial sweetener is something that we created with materials from the earth. So artificial is natural because it's what's fucking here, right? Like, it's
Mhm.
not like we got it from an alien planet and it arrived to us as sucralose. Like, that's that's not how it worked. And so, like, everything that is nature is also nurture and vice versa. So, like, even the distinction doesn't make that much sense to me, although it does map onto uh type of conversation that I think most people understand, right? So, but I think if you boil it down to the actual simplistic split, I think my bet is that it's almost exclusively nature.
Mm, interesting. Chrissy, anything to add?
I don't think so.
Now, the real question is, do I leave that in the podcast or do I take that out of the podcast?
I just leave it in.
I don't think anyone said anything that's going to hurt my feelings, and you'll never hurt my feelings, Killian. I don't, yeah, it's be very, very rare. But with having this conversation with Christy and I after we'd done the research, and sadly, like we couldn't even really go against you. I tried to like I have some questions here that I was like, I'm gonna say because like I'm gonna get them stumped, and then we chat. And I'm like, oh, crap, that kind of vetoes that question. And I can't say that. And I am more on the side. I think I'm like in between. I think I'm like weirdly in between. Some days I'm like, yeah, I 100% agree with Killian. And then other days I'm like, um, but I do think it's the struggle because like I can see it. You know what I mean? But I have this thing talking to me, telling me, wait, that's not true. You've made the decisions. You know, so like that's I think a big thing with me right now as well.
Do you think bears have free will?
Mm-mm.
Do you think babies have free will? Like a
So
baby,
here,
like an infant.
so I have something with a bear, not a baby. A lot of it, in my opinion, is instinct. What's your thought with that?
Well, sure, but instinct doesn't map onto free will.
100%. Because like I always think of like everyone's terrified of bears. I get it, me too. Like I don't ever want to encounter one. Majority of the time, they're just trying to live.
Yeah, but my
If
question,
Go ahead.
what I'm trying to get at is what's the difference between you as a biological system and the bear?
I have this thing talking to me.
This, you don't know the bear doesn't. We share 50% of our
It's true.
DNA with a fucking banana. Like,
Yeah.
why would you think that we're so different? You know, like I think so
100%.
much of this, like from outside of a religious context, like people believing in free will, it's just like arrogance. It's like positive human arrogance. You know, it's like
Mm.
we're so different from the other animals on the planet. Like, and that's why I ask about a baby, because I think like a baby doesn't have free will. That thing is just like reaching for the boob and crying when it's hot and when it's cold and it's confused and it's like what am I doing here? And
Yeah.
so if we can agree that a baby doesn't have free will, then what you have to posit if you're going to believe in free will that it all of a sudden pops in at some point. I'm like, how does that make sense? You know, like your brain structure is not that different. Like, oh, does the development of the prefrontal cortex all of a sudden magically instill us with free will? Like, I don't think so. You know, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps, and chimps throw shit at each other all the time. Like, I just, I think from like that when you really get to like the physical facts of how similar we are to all these other things that don't display any semblance of having free will, it's like really hard to make the argument.
I have nothing to say on that because like it's so true when you boil it down to a baby. I don't think I could ever try to argue that. What about you, Christy?
Yeah, I mean, when I started like looking at all this, I didn't ever really have too many red flags, to be honest. I was like, oh, this all makes sense to me, especially like where I'm at with like I just like recently went through this whole because you brought it up, Killing the whole like universal consciousness. Like I just like a month or more ago, like just really started like thinking about that really hard. And so because I was already thinking along those lines, like starting to think about this, I was like, oh, well, this helps that make more sense to me. And this, that makes more sense with this. So it's been, I don't know, I feel like it's, like I said, it's made me feel more peaceful in a way because like one of the big things that like you hear when you look into this is it's like your life, you stop kind of fighting so much like against yourself because your life, you kind of like realize it couldn't have been any other way, in that exact microsecond, like that's the way it was meant to be. And so it's like, okay, cool. I'm cool with that. I can deal.
Yeah, and it like related to running, it can help you when you're suffering in an ultra. Like the moment is beautiful because the moment cannot be otherwise. Like you are there in night two and you're hallucinating and you're your feet hurt and all of these things that you sort of wish you could change. But if you can just accept all of that and the moment as is, like that's the key. And I think there's a reason why like so much Buddhist wisdom trends towards the idea of acceptance. Like I do think you can become, and Liz and I have talked about this in the past in regards to the Stoics. Like, I don't think my theory is that for human happiness, contentment, whatever, you actually don't want your like mood line to be flat. You know, I do think you want highs and lows, but what acceptance does is it compresses the highs and lows. So like my lowest like we obviously recognize that at some point it's unhealthy. Like that's why bipolar exists. Like the highest highs, the lowest lows. And so like everyone knows you want your line more compressed than that. But I think and there might be different ways in which people can achieve this and different levels of that line compression that are optimal for different people. But if you can get your highs to not feel so egotistical and prideful and your lows to be filled with forgiveness, then you're entering a place where you can accept the fact that life is difficult and there's so much chaos and 99.999% of things are out of your control, even if you do believe in the framework of choices.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, and especially like applying it to ultras because I think a big part of doing ultras is really, like you said, accepting what's happening in the moment because so many things happen out there that you can't change. And the people who are more successful or, do great at completing their races, it's because they accept those things and they just keep going. Because if you sit there and you just have a mental breakdown because you have a blister, those are the people who are going to DNF. Whereas the people who accept it and, keep pushing, keep going, I don't know. I think that's personally like, that's why I love ultras is because it is beautiful. Like you said, like
Yeah.
it's so like beautiful to be in that moment, to be suffering, to accept it and know that like, this is it. This is what I'm here for. And that's awesome.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And it's so funny. I literally was just saying, like, it's so hard for me to be in a present moment. But I think back to like what you just said, Christy, and it's 100% true. Like when I am running, I am always super present.
Mhm.
Always, 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 especially in a race. And, I think back to a race where I struggled and was like, there was no thought in my mind, like, oh, pity me, this sucks. I'm going to stop, blah, blah, blah. It was like, well, this fucking sucks. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to just take care of it and keep going, and I, yeah, acceptance of what was going on was the only option during that. And yeah, you just made me kind of take back the words I thought about not being present. I am present at times, just not all the time.
I mean, no one can be present all the time. We have this like distraction machine that lives in with us all the times in the form of our phone, and then our brain is so hackable. Like why is it that you get on Instagram to respond to a direct message, and then all of a sudden, 35 minutes later, you're like staring at a video of someone doing a backflip off a mountain. You're like, oh
Yeah.
shit, I just got sucked in. It's like and that's another instance where it's like if I have free will, like I'm not deciding to do that because I don't want to be here, right? But it's like our brainstem is just like dopamine, hackable, lizard brain, like boom, it's there. And that's why like the algorithms have it figured out. But yeah, like being present and on the wall of my home gym, I have discipline as freedom. But I think if you and like that motivates me, right? Like, but if you apply acceptance as freedom to your greater life, like that might even be a better way to live because then there is this balance between like listening to the angry voice in my head of that's like get to fucking work like my little baby David Goggins that lives inside me, and then there's the balance of the self-love, right? And so I think a lot of people could use a lot more David Goggins, but for me personally, part of my journey the past few years has been to give myself a little bit more charity. So there's like this mixture that this is like cocktail you want for any individual to like be successful. It's like we ask on the intake form for coaching, like, do you want tough love or do you like a little bit of hand holding? And ultimately, no one is going to be a 1 or a 10 on that level. It's like
Mhm.
either of those is unhealthy.
For sure. Yeah, and I love the aspect that you just said of like I feel like in life we hit that one point where we have to be all David Goggins and like maybe to get through that point of life, like we need the really tough love, hard shit, do the hard things. And then we get to a point like where you have been, Killian, where you need to be more not so David Goggins and be more charitable to yourself and like, no, hey, I need to take a rest. I know, and Killian's talked about this. I know Chrissy and I have talked about this too, but like we experience people that are like overtraining, doing a whole bunch of shit all too much all at once. And we're like, no, 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 you need to dial back a little bit. Like you're doing too
Yeah.
much. And I know ultra running is probably one of the bigger things of that. Like we're all overdoers in all this. And I think there becomes a point when, not to say like we've matured or anything of that, but like you realize you don't need to be all gung ho all the time. And sometimes settling down into something that is more reasonable and or better for you as a person is where you need to be in life. And we'll go through the ebbs and flows of that.
And meditation is so helpful. We've talked a lot about it, but just take some deep breaths. Like there's a reason that in elementary schools they have like, take 10 deep breaths written on the wall so that when, some 5-year-old boy is going like is on like a psycho rampage, and I'm talking about me, like I was that type of kid, like take 10 deep breaths, and it works. Like it actually does work. And like yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly how that connects to free will, but it's like I think it's just the acceptance piece. It's like if you can just accept that we're all on that Microsoft screensaver and you're one of those dots, like then you can enjoy whatever your route happens to be.
For sure, for sure. Anything else that either of you want to pitch in?
We should have another conversation about universal consciousness sometime. I've also got a great audiobook for that.
Oh my goodness. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's the book?
it's called Lights On and it's actually by Sam Harris's wife. So it's Annika Harris. It's fantastic. It gets into a bunch of quantum mechanics stuff too that'll totally blow your mind.
Oh, I am
Yeah.
so yeah. So we'll have another podcast on that. I wrote the book down, Lights On.
Yeah, we gotta have our book club. Go
Yeah.
read our book.
It's really good. It's kind of like a podcast series / audiobook.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So now, Killian, we're gonna have to have a series of Killian talk, and it's just gonna be like I don't even know what to call it. Yeah. Oh my gosh, who knows?
We could just call it like Philosophy Hour with Liz, Christie, and Killian.
Instead of Coach's Corner, it'll be Philosophy Corner.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. No, this is great. And truly so pumped to have both of you on here and all of us to chat about probably something that no one on this podcast would have ever thought they would hear and listen to, but it's going to continue because now we have a new book that we need to start reading and listening to. And then we'll come back and talk all things on that. But thank you both so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. I know all of us are super busy and we have so much going on. So I appreciate both of your time and talking all things about free will.
Yeah, thank you both. I mean, so fun to talk to thoughtful people about this, and just like really cool that even though I was reluctant to kind of bring this up on single track, that it managed to connect in a way that you both found interesting. And yeah, this was like, I love talking about this shit. So it's great.
Yeah, I love hearing things like this because it's like I would have never, like again, like talking about no free will, I would have never just like started thinking about this one day. And it's like you put that bug in my ear and now here we are, right?
Yep.
It's so true. And you kind of mentioned this, Killian, but like I've been on a philosophy like dive the past few years of my life. And I've heard this word, I've seen it phrased, and I didn't put much mind to it. But you talked about it, I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? And here we are today. So yeah, I didn't no free will, just saying.